to get into something like this. And because what business does a cardiologist have to start talking about history in a historical, place? But before I start, I just want to thank a few people. I mean, Nicole Raghunath has, it's understatement to say she's been mentored. I mean, if it wasn't for her, this book wouldn't be a book. We would just have some, papers lying around. And Smith, for those who don't, like history, I recommend a very nice book. It's called Many Past of Indian River. It's about Ganga. And that has gotten him enough fame that he's in trouble with some of the right wingers in India. So if you like that sort of thing, this is a book for you. And some people who are not here, I also want to thank Mrs. Ravek. This is the first time I've met her, but she happened to review my manuscripts and help make it a better book. Paul Taylor, he sent me a message this morning. He's here in spirit because he, of all the people, was one who got the Smithsonian behind the book. So with that, I mean, there are a lot of people I want to thank, but I don't want to keep you waiting over here. So I want to start with the Japji of Guru Nanak. So if you notice here, the book belongs, the Japji is Guru Nanak's, and it's published by the Smithsonian. So I just happen to be the medium between the two. I'm sort of living in reflected glory from these two, eminent personalities and places. So for those of you who may not know about the Japji, it's actually a very short poem. It's only 38 paragraphs, but it's the most recited poem among the Sikhs. It's the foundational concept of Sikh philosophy comes from the Japji, and people believe it's a transformational text because people and personalities have changed reading this text. So why would Smithsonian be interested in something that is a sacred scripture? For the very same reason, the Smithsonian would be interested in this place. So if you look at this picture, this is you call it a church of some kind. It'd probably be right because you have an altar in the back, there's some priest over there. But if you just focus on that, you'll miss out something which is actually very stunning about this place, because not only is this just a chapel, it's actually a treasure trove of art, history, culture. People call it a civilizational wonder. The same way it is with the Japji of Guru Nanak. Japji is, of course, it's a sacred scripture, and we all know that. But what else is Japji Sahib? It's also a literary gem. It's a work of high philosophy. In the same way, just like you have Sistine Chapel as a civilizational product, the Japji itself, people believe, is a civilizational product. How about the translations? Talking about translations, this is not the first translation, and I believe it will not be the last translation. So this is just a small list of academic translations in English, and there are 12 people starting. The first translation, I believe, in English was Ernest Trump. The last one in 205 by Shackle and Mundale. So the question would be, why would you need one more translation? What right does somebody else have to do it? But before we do that, I want to take you back again to another work of literature. So Dante's Divine Comedy. So the Divine Comedy, it's a metaphysical poem. It's rich with imagination. It has allegories and metaphors, and it enriched the Tuscan language. They call it the enduring classic. People think it's timeless poetry and timeless literature. And this is just a small list of about 20 people who've translated Dante's Divine Comedy, including people like Henry Wordsworth Longfellow. And the last translation was 2013. Another book, the Bhagavad Gita, it's a 2,000-year-old poem. There are more than 200 translations in English. By late 1900s, there were more than 1,900 translations in different languages. So compared to that, when you look at it, where does Japji stand there? The Japji of Guru Nanak is also rich with peoples and places. It has mythology, it has metaphors, it has stars and galaxies. It has a rich language, and it also has enduring philosophy. So when you look at it that way, the Japji belongs in the highest forms of human imagination, literary and philosophical traditions. So when you talk about work of high literature and philosophy, Japji also it's a masterpiece that bears a reinterpretation for each generation. And that's how the Smithsonian got interested in the the Japji's translation. But I have to admit, in some ways, you have to understand this is a personal journey. I don't claim this is the last work on the Japji, but this is somebody, a Sikh who reads the Japji. What do we take away from it? Guru Nanak in the poem itself talks about Matvit Ratan Jawahar Manik. He says, you have the jewels in your mind. Those jewels have to be ignited, and when you read the Japji, each one of us may take away something different. So I just want you to understand this is a humble attempt by one person. This is my interpretation of how Guru Nanak wanted it. The translation wasn't easy, not simply because it's in 500-year-old Punjabi, but Guru Nanak talks about concepts that have no equivalent in English language. He talks about words like Onkar, Hukam, Naam, Dharam, Karam, Saram, Nadar. We have no comparative words in English language. Not only that, there was a paper published, Sonia, you probably knows about this, in 2017 by Professor Nirvikar Singh, who talked about challenges of translating the Guru Granth Sahib with some illustrative examples in it. So he says, take the easiest of the padi. This is the 13th padi, which goes something like Manne sur thoye man bud, Manne sagal pavan ki sur, Manne mu chota na khaye, Manne jam ke saath na chaye. And you all understand, Manne is a very commonly used Punjabi word. So how do you translate this into English? The first translation by Ernest Trump, he called the first line, Manne sur thoye man bud, is if one minds, the understanding and wisdom is obtained in the heart. So to him, Manne was one's mind. Macauliffe came later. He said Manne means by obeying him, the wisdom and the understanding enters the mind. Following that, in the 1960s, Gopal Singh did a translation and he said Manne is people who believe. Khushwant Singh did a translation which was in part supported by UNESCO, and Khushwant Singh thought Manne means belief. Manmohan Singh did a translation and said Manne means not believing but truly believing. Sant Singh Khalsa's translation is the one that you see in the Gurdwaras around the world when you see the translation, and Sant Singh thinks Manne means faithful. Nikki Guninder Kaur, an eminent scholar, what she feels is the best word that actually translates Manne means remembering. MacLeod did translation after her and said Manne was believing, and Christopher Sheckle teamed with is a linguist who teamed with Professor Mundair in Michigan, and he says Manne means acceptance. So here you have 9 translators, and they use 6 different words for one word that all of you and I use everyday language. So which word should we take? All of them? None of them? How do we reject or accept any one of them? In my humble way of looking at it, I went to Guru Nanak's own words. Guru Nanak starts his opening body by saying, Soche soch na hoi, ye soche lakhwar, which translates into thoughts alone cannot enlighten even 100,000 thoughts. Chuppe chup na hoi, not by reflection, not by reverie, not by solitude can insight be sought. And that's what he says is, Hukum rijai chalna, Nanak likhya now. By walking the walk of Hukum divine, oh Nanak, that is what you are supposed to do. So if it's not by thoughts, not by reflection, all these activities in the mind, obeying him, belief, faithful, remembrance, a lot of these activities are taking place in the mind. So if Guru Nanak says we cannot just simply stay in the mind, what other word would translate into by following? And in my humble way of looking at it, I thought the word that best describes Manne would be a follower. You have to walk the walk. So in the book that you have in front of you, this is a translation of the body. Followers derive philosophical skills. Followers understand all spheres. Followers do not suffer any ills. And followers fear of death deny. So this is just one example why another translation helps us grasp the whole enormity of Guru Nanak, because Guru Nanak has a way of transmitting very complex thoughts in very short, very few words. So coming back to the book is not just translation, because the idea was not just a translation for me. It was really to understand the Japji and what is the big idea of the poem. One of the translators I have heard over the years is the philosopher Osho Rajneesh, who was PhD in philosophy, and Osho had a very high understanding of Japji, and very high regard of Guru Nanak. But one thing Osho said was, he said Guru Nanak is an uncut diamond. His verses come randomly, and you have to take whatever you take. And that sort of stung in the sense because, to me, trained in science, I have to be logical. I have to make sense of when I'm reading something. And I try to look into it a little bit more deeply and say, does it make sense or not? And at least to my mind, Guru Nanak is logical, except you sometimes have to seek the logic. The Japji, the big idea of Japji is basically, it talks about the nature of divine, the universe, mankind, the means and the ends. Basically, it's a big idea that most philosophies start with in the universe. This picture here is a picture depicting a 2,000-year-old philosophy from India, which basically asks the very same questions. You see a woman on the side, her eyes are tied, her name is Queen Gandhari. This is from the Mahabharata. She's sitting with a dead son in front of her, and she's pointing a finger at a person standing next to her. That dead person in front of her is a son who she lost in a very bloody battle in which thousands of people died. Gandhari lost 100 sons. The person she points is the avatar of Lord Krishna. Lord Krishna was, according to the ancient mythology, was an avatar of God himself who was walking among the men. And Gandhari's finger pointed toward Lord Krishna is actually mankind's finger pointed towards God. Because we don't know what purpose do we have. Why are we here? What should we do? Why do we suffer? This is a question not just for Indian philosophy. It's a philosophy everywhere around the world. Here is basically a paraphrasing of another philosopher from ancient Greece named Epicurus, whose words were summarized by a Scottish philosopher, David Hume, and he put it this way. He says, is God willing to prevent evil but he is not able? Then he is not omnipotent. Is he able but not willing? Then he is malevolent. Is he both able and willing? Then why would you have evil? And if God is neither able nor willing, why would you call somebody like that a God? And that is crux of question that mankind has tried to answer through different philosophers, social scientists, and thinkers. The way ancient Indians answered that question was the way Lord Krishna answered that. And it's a very beautiful way he portrayed it. He, according to the drama, he looked at Gandhari and said, you are right. I could have stopped all this evil and I could have stopped the bloodshed, but I didn't let it happen. But look at it this way. You grieve for 100 sons who died. The entire universe is my children. If you grieve, how much grief would I have if I looked at it the way you do? But I know something you don't, that this world that you look around you is not real, it's Maya. This concept of Maya explained it as a civilizational concept that came down to from India, starting from the Vedas all the way from Buddha and Shankara. Buddha talked about the Maya. Buddha looked at it another way. He looked at suffering. Mankind was full of suffering, but suffering had no meaning. The world that he saw was ephemeral. Then he thought, something that has no meaning and has so much suffering, the only way he can explain that is, it could not be real. It's Maya, samsara. Buddha was followed by another philosopher, a 32-year-old Hindu monk who wrote treatises before he died. And he talked about the entire universe to him was one. It was the Brahman. Everything was a manifestation of the divine entity. And that's where his famous words come from. Tattvam Asi, which means that thou art, everybody is a manifestation of God. But the world that you live in is samsara, it's not real, that's why you cannot appreciate who you are. The problem is if you put things in that context, the people start taking away the notion, so why even take this word seriously? Why not walk away? Why not be an ascetic? Why do you talk about social justice? Why do you worry about caste inequalities? The world is not real. And this is the world that Guru Nanak was born in 550 years ago. And Guru Nanak started looking at the question again from the very beginning. This is from the Japji Sahib. How then shall the truth be known? How can the veil of illusion be torn? And Guru Nanak formulated in his own words, he says, by walking the walk of Hukum divine. And that is where his concept of Kun comes on. The Hukum was Guru Nanak's innovation. He agreed with the philosophers before him that indeed the world was full of suffering. He also agreed with Shankara that there is one reality, he called it Nam. Basically, everything you see around you is Nam. The universe is a manifestation of that divine. Jeta kita teta now, wind nami nahi koi thao. So everything you see has a name. Everything that has a name is a part of the divine. But he said this universe is real. It is the circle. This is a Nanakian innovation that goes on further to explain why we are here. The why part comes from Hukam. Life is a part of a divine plan. That plan happens to be the Hukam. Key to understanding all this is going to be eternal. The reason why we are here, you have to achieve grace that gives you the understanding. That the grace comes from understanding and following the Hukam. The real purpose is to actually get your internal virtues, to live your virtues, which talks to you through your conscience, and that is a key to flourishing. Hukam Rijai Chalana, Nanak Likhya Naam. So I want you to, next 15 minutes or so, I want you to follow with me the Japji. Many people in this room probably read the Japji on a daily basis, but I want you to think of it as a 5-part poem. The first part, of course, is Guru Nanak's description of the divine. It's the Nirgun divine, the God without any attributes. It talks about one all-pervading fundamental reality, Ek Onkar, and most people take away this means it's a monotheistic God, and it's okay. It is one God, but Guru Nanak's God, his idea of divine, is a lot deeper than just a single entity. It's one all-pervading fundamental reality. Everything you see is a part of divine. That divine is Nam, mover and shaker. That divine has no equals. There's nothing outside, so there's nothing to fear or nothing to favor. There's nothing outside that, and that divine happens to be self-created. Starting out with that, it's fundamental statement, Guru Nanak goes on to the next part. The next part of Japji, I want you to think of the first 26 bodies as a total part in itself. A lot of that is description, some prescription, but it talks about mankind, the beginning of mankind's quest, the futilities of the things that men do, and the concepts of Hukam and Naam. So in the first 26 bodies, you have people, places, good, bad, ugly, everything is part of it. And after that, the body 27, I want you to think of that as a third part of the Japji by itself. It's the longest body. It's purely descriptive. It's all a description. It starts with So Dar Keha, So Kar Keha. What is the God's door? What is God's divine dwelling? And you think of, okay, I'm going to be explained where the God is. And he talks about there are musicians there are scholars, heroes, judges, philosophers. If you think of a Tower of Babel, this is Nanakian's Tower of Babel, except it keeps going. Then he talks about there are gods and demigods there are creative myths in there. There are lands, planets, stars, multiverses. There's also the omnipotent one. Entire creation, if you want one of the best description of creation you see is the body 27. And then Nanak says, Hor kete gavan Nanak kya vichare. There are many more things. Poor Nanak cannot even name those things. But the idea is a comprehensive idea of the universe. The point in this body is the centerpiece of everything is not mankind. The divine is center. Mankind just happens to be only one small part of that creation. This is a watershed both in terms of the descriptive part of the poem, but also conceptually it's a watershed. Once you cross over this watershed, you go to part 4. Now you start your ascent and transcendence. The body 28, body 38, a lot of these are prescriptions now. There'll be some descriptions, it turns opposite to the part 2nd. He talks about, immediately after talking about the universe and megaverses, he brings you down. The next body is Sarampat Chori. He talks about humility, kindness, contentment. He's talking about one person who walked out of the world because he thought the world was not real. And he says, no. You don't need a yogi's kambandal. You don't need the yogi's clothes. Come back. Make kindness, compassion, introspection your yogi's tools, and you will ascend. The ascent he describes in the 5 khands. He discussed the concept of free will, where in the Nanakian concept there is no free will. Everything is part of the Hukam. And he talks about personal virtues. This is the place where he talks about going from lowly worms to stars, he says, Guru Nanak says in so many words, thinking of the skies, even the worm aspire to fly on hearing of the skies. So the next part, the final part, and I'll come back to this part again, is the final shlok. What does the shlok say? It talks, Pavan Guru Pani Pita Mata Tatam Hat. Air, water, earth, days and nights. These are the cradle of sentient life, not just mankind. Everything living lives there. Mankind devises their own destiny within this. And this, if you look at it another way, is the Sargun divine. And in Guru Nanak's concept, the space-time is a continuum. 500 years before we had the modern physics tell you there's a continuity. I don't think Guru Nanak knew all this because of anything. Guru Nanak intuitively grasped the idea that the creation, time and space is basically one. And time and material is one, and we just happen to be a manifestation of that. Now, how do you ascend through this? Okay, now, once he's described everything, Guru Nanak tells you, how do you go up from being a worm to the Swangala Akaski Kita Iris? So, a small worm can think of the stars. You have the imagination, you can ascend to it. The way he says, you ascend through his personal virtues. Everything is a turtle. There is nothing to go. Koi tirath. There is nowhere you can have a holy bathing. You don't have to go to temples. Everything comes from inside. These are 5 personal virtues Guru Nanak wants you to walk you through. These realms that you develop personal virtues. These are the Dharam Khand, Gyan Khand, Saram Khand, Karam Khand, and Sach Khand. And all of them have a purpose. So you have a board of righteousness, a board of wisdom, creativity, effort and grace, and truth. They all have a purpose. You cultivate virtue. Your ego has to be shattered. You create mindfulness. You train desire, and that's when you aim for transcendence. You go beyond the human condition. Let me take an example. So Dharam Khand, this is the translation from the book itself. Rati Ruti Thiti War. I mean, it's one of some of the most beautiful words, if you can think of in Punjabi literature, comes from Guru Nanak. So he talks about nights and days, season and dates, winds, waters, fires he made. Amidst it all is a virtuous workshop. This flawless dust, planet Earth. Now this is not Maya, this is the Dharamsal. This is one of the most beautiful creations of God, is this planet Earth. Animal and worms, so colorful, so many names, all wonderful. By words and deed, all will be judged. For righteous is he, his tribunal just. The accepted ones, they seek his grace. On sands of time, they leave their trace. Those ripe or not will also be discovered. This, O Nanak, will eventually occur. And then he says, what is the purpose of life? Virtue is duty in the realm of righteousness. And I'll come back to that concept. So the things he talks about in righteousness is, it's a land of virtue, to place to be judged here and now. The goal is to seek his grace. And from there he goes to Gyan Khand. And Gyan Khand is very descriptive, but basically he says Gyan Khand is a place to ponder. And you ponder about how winds blow, how fires, how Brahma, Mahesh, places, persons, all those things you go through. By the time you go through it, you develop a sense of wonder and humility. You understand the big picture. It's a place to ponder and reflect. You develop a self-awareness, but your ego goes down. And that's the general idea. From there, he wants you to go to the Saram Khand. Saram Khand is a realm of bliss. Aesthetics is speech. Here are created figures unique. So here you are into creative mode. Once you have mastered dharma, you have mastered your ego, you go to creativity. You have aesthetics, creativity, magnificence. It's a world of beauty now. And then he takes you to the Karam Khand. Karam Khand is the realm of karma. The word here is fortitude, and he talks about heroes, prowess, heroines, nobility, serenity. And the watchwords here are fortitude, heroes, prowess, heroines. What are we talking about? This is the place where you have to learn to be courageous, to demonstrate grace. This is the place of being, you bring your wisdom, you bring your sense of justice, and now you have to act. And finally you get into Sach Khand. And I don't want to sort of read the whole thing, but Sach Khand is a place where there's no personal places. There is a formless one. You have graceful visions. You have planets, stars, galaxies. You watch, admire, and contemplate. And this is a place where you achieve transcendence. He wants you to forget you have lived a good life, you have walked the walk. He wants you to look at your place in the universe and revel in the beauty of all that you see. It's a beautiful world. All this is real. And all this is us. Guru Nanak wants you to understand this. So the 5 cardinal Nanakian virtues are justice, wisdom, creativity, courage, fortitude, and transcendence. What do they tell you? What is the final message of Guru Nanak? The final message is mastery over self. Is that it? How relevant is it in today's world if you go to 500-year-old poem? And I want to change tack. I want you to take to a paper that was published in 1978 in Chicago. We reproduced thousands of times. And talks about this life satisfaction paradox. And in this paper, Brickman and his colleagues, what they did was they interviewed lottery winners and people who had become paraplegics in accidents. And they looked at their happiness quotient. The happiness, of course, went up tremendously if you win a lottery for a few days, and it goes down tremendously if you have an accident. The interesting thing is, after 6 months or so, they come to the baseline. There's a lot of methodological flaws in the study, and it's been criticized, but the point is still there. There is a baseline, you can go up and down. So happiness does not really come from what we can do or achieve in the world. That basically set up a question for a scientific study for a good life. And this man, his name is Martin Seligman. He past president of American Psychological Society. In 1996, he gave a presidential lecture, and he talked about psychology being split into 2 camps. There were the clinicians who talked about healing disease and mental illness and psychotherapy, but he said there were also the academics who were more interested in what is well-being, what makes human thrive, what are we here to do. Now we're not even talking about any literature, we're not talking about any religion, we're talking pure science. And he hoped to bring science and practice together, and this is where they had a birth of something called positive psychology. So positive psychology is a movement for the last 20 years, it's been around. It's a study of conditions, processes, characters, and contribute to optimal functioning. So from that, this is a paper coming from Dr. Sanjha. She is one of the professors at the University of Riverside. And she basically, this is data that shows that red thing you see, 10%, that is all the amount of contribution that external world gives to your happiness. Okay, so let me repeat that again. 10% of what happens to your world around you contributes what happens inside you. 90% of that is either you're born with or what you create in your own mind. So from this, basically, they put together a handbook of good life. It's a scientific study, 3-year project, 55 distinguished social scientists, and they studied last 2,500 years of human history and social philosophy, from Greek philosopher to world religions. And they came up with the idea that character, strengths, and virtues are the backbone of life satisfaction. And they came up with 2 projects. One is its ongoing Virtue in Action and Primer project, and I'll talk a little bit about it. The whole idea is that your thoughts, your feelings, and your behavior, they are all controlled by something which is your character. If you can get your character right, you get everything right, and everything else falls in place. From the handbook, they have come up with, this is scientific data now. So Seligman and Peterson came up with 6 cardinal virtues that basically constitutes a person who has a good life. Wisdom and knowledge, courage, humanity, justice, temperance, and transcendence. Look at the 5 hunts of Guru Nanak. Justice, wisdom, creativity, courage, fortitude, transcendence. I'm not making this up. So if you look at it, there's a remarkable overlap between the 2. So what do they both, the science and a philosopher and a thinker, think about? Human suffering can be tamed by a basic package of inner strengths and virtues that lead to a life of flourishing. So come back to the question of evil now. How would Guru Nanak answer that question? Guru Nanak wants you to think differently. Okay, so it's not that the evil is different. There are some physicians in the room. Think about it. There was a time there was a pandemic in Europe, wiped out a third of Europe, and they thought the flu epidemic was evil. Is God willing to prevent flu and not able? That would be absurd. I mean, physicians know this is basically a phenomenon of nature. You can deal with it. You can use your intelligence to overcome this. And that is exactly what the Nanakian philosophy wants to tell you. Our concept of good and evil, pleasure, pain, are function of our senses and our attachments and our desires. Mankind cannot escape the human condition. That's hukum. You cannot get out of it. But we are endowed with imagination and intelligence. You are challenged to learn to live within hukum and conquer that which we call evil. That is Guru Nanak. Guru Nanak also wants you to understand that the love we have for people and things, experiences and places, that is being human. That's who we are. It comes from a fear of loss, of death, and of rejection. But the hukum also tells you that without death there is no birth. There is no renewal, no transmutation of life. And absence any dance of time and matter, the rhythms of union and disunion, this world is going to be a very static picture. It's pretty to look at, but there will be no meaning there. So finally, Guru Nanak's last shlok actually sums up everything. So who are we? From our deeds, right and wrong, comes our equivalence with the Lord. Otherwise, all to him are dear, who is far and who is near. There is no heaven or hell in Guru Nanak's way of thinking. It's all in your head. The sacred word, those who cherish, go with dignity when they perish. You can live a life of dignity. Look inside. Everything is within you. Their faces resplendent with light. Their deeds exalting many besides. So the Japji of Guru Nanak does not teach you how to pursue happiness. So that's not what it's about. It does not provide you with a custom-made meaning of life. What it does provide you is a freedom from anxiety and doubt. It teaches you an art of living gracefully and virtuously. It is a manual of how to flourish. So this is one of my favorite cartoons. It talks about meaning and happiness. I'm killing time while I wait for life to shower me with meaning and happiness. So we could do that. But anyway, my last two slides are about this. Some people may not know in the hall here. This man, he is Allama Iqbal, one of the preeminent philosophers of 20th century from India, a founding figure behind the idea of Pakistan. India and Pakistan do not agree on almost, there's nothing they can agree on, but they agree on one or two things. And one thing comes from Allama Iqbal. He talks about a poem that he wrote in his book called The Call of Marching Bells, Bangedara. And he talks about India ignored the message of Buddha. He talks about Buddha, and then he talks about how Buddha came over and India still was in slumber. And he finishes the poem later, only ages later lit the lamp once again. Fir aayi awaaz tawheed ki Punjab se, Hind ko jagaya ek marde kamal de khwab se. Then came along a splendid man to rouse India from its slumber. And Iqbal said that man was Nanak. Thank you very much.